Alright, so today we're going to be looking at the Night Lords Part 2. Links are going to be down in the description below to the original channel and video. Now, before we get into the actual talking of the video, past couple days, been incredibly tired, mentally, physically. I don't know if you all saw the Spartan race video that I put up. That video took me around 10 to 12 hours to actually edit properly. And it's probably the hardest video for me to actually get done. And a couple days prior, I was also trying to prepare somewhat for it, although me and my buddies didn't really prepare at all. And we did pretty good. So if you're curious about that, see how I do in a type of obstacle like that, check the description down below. I'm going to be linking the link to that video down there as well. But I finally get back to watching some more 40K, reacting to the Night Lords Part 2. Now, some of the things I did find out from some of the comments was that, yes, I can guarantee now Conrad is not the one here. He's already dead. He was in the Heresy where he ended up dying, which I heard he actually got assassinated, but he let himself be. And this is also maybe due to the he didn't like his legion, and his legion really didn't like him. And that apparently somebody also commented that he tried to go to World War to kind of address this, but then he had some kind of vision, and then they kind of just drew him mad, and he had this weird fit go on. He hurt World War, and then at some point he just ends up joining the Heresy or Horus Heresy. Why do I keep getting that backwards? And then in turn, sometime in that moment, he ends up dying due to assassination. And I've also been pronouncing his name wrong. It's Kurz. Apparently, there was a Colonel Kurtz. I think somebody said it was the inspiration for Apocalypse Now. Alright, so let's go ahead and get right into the video.
Welcome, gentle listener. I apologize for the severity of this introduction, but there can be times when the threat, the terror, the horror of an enemy can be denuded by being too distant, too hypothetical. I felt it was necessary to show, rather than tell, the true threat of this, one of the most dark and terrible groups of beings in the entire grim darkness of the future. For today, we will now go into a very brief introduction to the 8th Legion of the Legiones Astartes, the Night Lords. Please remember that this is an introduction only. Should there be the appetite, I will engage in further entries for this, one of the most terrible forces to stalk the galaxy. For they have been set loose by the opening of the Cicatrix Maledictum. The 13th Black Crusade smashed the bottleneck of Cadia and opened that rent across the entire galaxy. Now they can go back and forth with ease, foraying into the material realm, then retreating back to the warp at a whim. The Warhammer 40K setting has become a thing of even more grim darkness than ever before.
Also, I did hear in the comments as well that these Night Lords were supposed to be like kind of a necessary evil, or I think it was like judge, jury, executioner. But I heard someone also say that they were kind of like a terrorist, or supposed to be somewhat like terrorists, right? And to essentially strike fear, kind of show you what would happen if you ever betrayed the Imperium of Man. But then eventually they ended up taking it too far, and they actually ended up enjoying doing this, and then they would try to find any little justification to actually be able to do these things that they love doing, which is torturing people. And then apparently they also don't really necessarily worship one chaos god, that they're kind of chaos undivided, and they kind of just like to do their own thing.
To quote, "My sons, the galaxy is burning. We all bear witness to a final truth. Our way is not the way of the Imperium. We have never stood in the Emperor's light, never worn the Imperial Eagle, and you never will. You shall stand in midnight clad, your claws forever red, with the lifeblood of my father's failed empire, warring through the centuries as the talons of a murdered god. Rise, my sons, and take your wrath across the stars in my name, in my memory. Rise, my Night Lords." End quote. Conrad Kurz, Primark of the 8th Legion of the Legiones Astartes, the Night Lords. Truer words have very seldom been said in all of the grim dark, for the 8th Legion were not akin to any of their brother Astartes, Where they had shining armor and a bold image of their own worthiness and righteousness, the Eighth were under no such illusions, even from their inception on Holy Terra. For when the Emperor of Mankind designed his 20 Primarks, from which his 20 legions of Space Marines would spring, he calculated all of the facets and forces he would require. His intent was to form the perfect army, the perfect warriors, the perfect tool for him to not only take every star and system of the Milky Way galaxy, but also to then hold them. For this he would need many tools, for each of his Primarchs was to be a mighty general with the most formidable force the human race has ever produced, the Space Marines. Each legion of Astartes, Space Marines, was to have a very specific role. Indeed, each would be able to wage war the likes had never been seen, but each would also have a niche, a specialization. Many were shining knights of honor and power, designed to represent the greatness and goodness that resided in the breast of humanity. They were to be paragons and glorious examples that could be displayed to all of the universe as the best of what it was to be human. Not so for the Night Lords. For every organization, every government, every military need have those who will follow orders, will do unspeakable things without complaint or resistance. Forces that will elicit terror in their enemies and allies alike. For the Emperor knew that his race was fractious, and that the combined goal that they worked toward would not be enough for many. He knew that it was inevitable that some of his fellow humans would become greedy, would lose purpose, would seek to aggrandize themselves at the first opportunity. The Master of Mankind, who had witnessed every age of humanity from their earliest forays into civilization all the way through the golden age of technology, and even through the calamity of Old Night, the age of strife.
Age of Strife, I really got to see that video. But, holy shit, I'm sweating. Ironic, right, that these guys are supposed to be men in a way to kind of, not only after, for example, if they conquer everything, but also to help make sure that no one tries to get greedy, like kind of like how we said, and then try to take more than what, I guess, what they need. Or like, in terms of making sure that at the end of the day, they're still with the Imperium of Man, right? And they don't try to maybe rebel or anything like that. And in case they do, that is why they have the Night Lords. The Night Lords, eventually, someone also said in the comments that they were incredibly effective at taking over planets, right? Because they would take certain cities, certain big cities, right, that probably had like the most types of defenses, right, or more men, and they would do unspeakable things to where the rest of the planet would just give up, right? So very effective in keeping people in line. But ironic that the Night Lords end up getting greedy and end up loving what they do, and then get greedy with like how the planet in that first story, at the beginning of the video in part 1, they start doing things like that, right? So, I mean, I think it's kind of ironic.
Humanity almost gutted out. He knew his race. He knew that many would simply bend the knee while his armies were present, only to renege on their oaths of fealty the instant he had departed. So, being the shepherd of all of humanity, he knew that he needed to have a deterrent. He needed to have a healthy respect from all of those worlds brought into compliance, but also a very necessary fear. Only in this way could he be guaranteed that one most elusive of all things, unity through loyalty. Humanity simply had no choice in his mind, or he would not have arisen, would not have thrown off his cloak of secrecy and taken the reins of direct power and leadership. Humanity had to be unified, or would be wiped out from his perspective. One that was very hard to argue with, considering the horrors of the Age of Strife, where Xenos, aliens, and demons had dominated and annihilated so many of our race. Hence, not all of his Primarchs, not all of his legions of Space Marines, could be the examples of virtue that was allotted to many. He needed a tool of fear, a bringer of terror. He needed a force that would be used to scare his people into staying compliant, to staying loyal. He had his Night Lords. The Primarchs were stolen by the...
Would you really need to go that far, though? I mean, granted, I know it's the 40k universe, but, for example, if you have a country, right, that is technically... Or, like, say you have a peace of land with people in it, and they don't. They're like kind of small, right? And then you got a bigger country that actually just took it over, right? Now, under most things, I mean, the way I would see it, right, is that nobody would want to rebel, mainly because, I mean, and if they did, maybe it'd be like small bands of people, but it's more along the lines like, hey, this other people, or like, for example, the Imperium of Men, have so much firepower, so what makes them think that if they try to rebel or do anything against them, that they're not just going to send a whole bunch of people to come mess them up, right? But then again, the Night Lords could also be a way, I can also see it as them being a way to not necessarily send so much resources to one specific area, to also establish that same kind of, hey, you better not do anything that goes against us, right? So you know what, now I can kind of see it, but I don't know, It's the whole thing with the necessary evil thing, I guess. I don't know, so it's tricky. It's tricky to think about.
Powers of chaos and spread throughout the galaxy, but still the legions had character, and were employed without their fathers, the Primarks, to lead them. The 8th, the Night Lords, were recruited from the most brutal prisons and pits of despair in all of Holy Terra, the present name of Earth, the cradle of humanity where the Emperor began his empire, his Imperium. They were scum. They would blanch at no activity, would bring a level of ferocity and sadism to their campaigns that would act as a deterrent forever after. When the Emperor had dominated all of Terra during the long and bloody Unification Wars, his instinct was proven right. Almost immediately, one of his defeated allies, the Saragorn Enclave, turned and rebelled. They continued to tinker with genetic engineering, were attempting psi-breeding, eugenics to attempt to create powerful psychers, a practice utterly banned by the diktat of the Emperor. The Master of Mankind was informed, and is reputed to have said just 3 words. Just 3. Send the 8th. The 8th Legion were deployed and assaulted.
Somebody commented that too, send the 8th. Makes a lot more sense now.
To the Enclave, but they did not roll in with tanks and overwhelming firepower alone, as the other legions would. They made a bloody horror of the entire region. They hunted and tortured each and every person there. They wiped the entire population away with a viciousness that was beyond belief. With this as an example of exactly what would happen if any rebelled, Terra stayed loyal. All of it. This was the way of the Night Lords. Fear. To act in such terrible and sadistic ways that entire star systems would then surrender to them when they had witnessed their savagery. It was true that any rebellion throughout the stars was almost instantly quashed by the mere mention of their name. Many a governor would toy with the idea of declaring his world independent of the Imperium, as humans are so oft willing to forget their own history so swiftly. The scars dealt to them during their domination and compliance would often lose their sting over a mere generation, but the threat of the 8th would dispel their errant dreams very swiftly. The mention of them alone was enough to loose the bowels of most. So even before they eventually turned to evil, theirs was never a force that could ever be described as good, as such a thing exists in the grim darkness of the future. When they were reunited with their Primarch, Conrad Kurz, they changed very little. When some legions found their Primarchs, it was either a magnificent time where they were enhanced and saved by their sire, as in the case of the Blood Angels and Sanguinius, or it was a time of change, as in the case of the Death Guard. But few legions were left without some form of transformation when their genetic father and spiritual leader, their Primarch, was discovered. But this was not so for the Night Lords. Kurz's world was not a place that would ever engender a good man to arise from it. Despite Conrad being genetically predisposed to try to seek for justice, for law and order at every point, his methods were twisted by his early years on the world of Nostromo. For it was a cesspit of lawlessness, a horror of a world where survival of the fittest was the only law, and murder, rape and massacre were nightly events. They were, until Conrad subjugated the world through fear alone. But this is a tale for another time, when we can discuss the tale of Conrad Kurz in full. It was the habit of the Emperor to gift the world of that a Primarch had grown up on, had usually dominated, as Conrad had Nostromo, as a recruitment world for their legion. As such, the 8th's recruits were from that world and had a part of its darkness. Later,
the world that the Kurz is from, I heard was supposed to be one of the worst ones that for any of the Primarks, right? And granted, considering what I'm hearing here, it's pretty obvious to see. But it also seems like, obviously, his guys, his legion, they're not listening to him, right? When he comes back, just kind of like we saw with all the other Primarks. Rogodorn comes to mind, right? That they really wanted to just like prove to him, like I guess, like they were worthy. And in this case, I'm not saying Conrad had bad leadership skills, but I mean, maybe he did have those skills to lead, but just considering where his legion came from, since they do come from the home world of the Primark, kind of what he said right here, maybe they were just too messed up to the point where it didn't matter what you said, how you try to lead them. And you experienced this many times in the military as well. In the Marine Corps specifically, one guy, I'm pretty sure I've mentioned it before, your last name starts with an L, so if you ever see this, just never listened. He possibly stayed the same way mentally and physically from when he got to the fleet and from when he left. Some guys just don't want to, and he wasn't even one of those guys that really did his job to at least just do his job, right? I at least do what you're supposed to do. I mean, he would do the very bare minimum. I mean, granted, I wasn't the best Marine. I did the best I could. Never really wanted to be dead weight to anybody else. And then I would do my 4 years and get out. That's it. But this guy didn't even do that. So when you have those type of people, especially if you have them in mass like that, I mean, granted, they are doing their job with this legion. But, I mean, obviously, Conrad wants them to do it a different way, from what it seems, but they're not listening.
Later, Nostromo was to only give reinforcements from the worst and most vile of all of its denizens. The Night Lords started badly, but would get progressively worse as time went on, as each and every Marine was a travesty of a thing that could barely be called human, and it was even before they were trained and used by the Night Lords to perform their reigns of terror. For the Night Lords would take pride in their work, but their goals were not the same as their Primarch. For Conrad thought that the ends justified the means. The horrific butchery of one city, not just the callous extermination, but the torture of his entire population over an extended period while being broadcast to all surrounding areas, would then lead to the entire world surrendering.
Yeah, so kind of like that. Someone else mentioned that why not just kill 50 high people, and then instead of having to sacrifice or having to kill 100,000 people, right? You know?
For fear. In this, Conrad could very realistically state that his tactics and strategies did not affect infrastructure and would mean a tiny proportion of the casualties that would have been created if another legion had invaded honorably. And he was right. But the fact remained that his legion did not have his ideal at their fore. Their eye was never on the ends, just the means. They did it because they could butcher and torture indiscriminately. They did it because they enjoyed it. And so Conrad eventually ended hating his own legion, something he was never shy of letting them know either. He went mad. His legion was declared rogue even before the drop site massacre on Istvan V, but was still ordered to act in that assault, one which would turn out to be an utter betrayal, as the Night Lords turned traitor and helped massacre the 3 loyalist legions of the first wave. But I will go into the massacre at Istvan in more detail in the future. With the Horus heresy now in full swing, Conrad did not so much follow Horus, but rebel against his father, an act of spite, perhaps, for the poisoned chalice that was passed to him by the Emperor of Mankind, to be built to strive for justice, but to lead a legion he despised, to perpetually perform actions he could never actually forgive himself for having ordered performed. But the Night Lords have never really gone fully into the fold of the other legions that began the wholesale and emphatic worship of chaos. Although there are some faithful amongst the legion, theirs is not a religious crusade, For them, following Abaddon on the path of chaos is not about zeal or serving their new dark gods. It is simply that they can now do whatever they wish, to whomever they wish. The chaos gods leave them be. Conrad was slain.
Oh, I just heard him say Conrad was slain. So I'm assuming he's about to get into the assassination a little bit. But this guy's a lot more complicated than what it seems now. I mean, it doesn't seem like mentally like he wants to do these things, but obviously he does them because he believes that way he can save more lives. Believed in the Emperor seems like at one point, probably not at this moment. And it seems like just someone who's in a shitty situation. And he said that he can't forgive himself for the things that he's done. I'm assuming that's why he just lets himself be assassinated, right? Because he's more complicated than what you would think from like a normal, I guess, quote-unquote villain, right?
Despite being one of the most powerful combatants of all of the sons of the Emperor, but he let his legion know he despised them before the deed was done. A deed he even permitted. Since that time, the Night Lords have been a thing of terror, not for, but against the Imperium of Man. The true levels of their viciousness I hope you gained from my introduction, but I shall one day go more into their tactics and more.
I'm pretty sure that's the symbol of the Inquisition. That looks like an orc's head. I mean, it could just be for like the actual picture. I don't know. I just thought that was interesting.
More of their history. For the time being, I hope, gentle listener, that you can see why the forces of chaos are feared, and why the Imperium is the way it is. In the face of enemies such as the Night Lords, perpetually a threat, perpetually just one slip away from penetrating your defenses and letting their evil loose on any sector, one can do nothing but become a thing of tyranny to prevent the greater evil. And at least, this is their argument. For the Night Lords are the thing that comes in the night. They are the lords of sadism and fear. They are the lords of the night. And the opening of the Cicatrix Maledictum means that they can go near anywhere, at any time. Nowhere is now safe from their predations. The beast, as they say, is well and truly abroad.
Let's go ahead and talk about that for a minute. It is a damn sauna in this room, man. It's getting really tough just because of how hot it is, and I can't really turn on any of the ACs, otherwise it gets picked up on the mic. But in any case, have the Night Lords in recent times, or at least as there's some kind of description or story somewhere that actually shows them taking on Space Marines from the other chapters or their legions, and then actually torturing them, just to kind of see, I guess, kind of how that interaction goes. Like, I mean, because you remember the beginning with that. I don't know if he was a captain. I think people were saying that it was kind of a captain in the beginning of the video from the story, saying that the one talking says that often the biggest ones don't last that long, right? So curious to see, in a weird way, kind of what I like say an Imperial Fist, right? How long they would last, I guess, being tortured, which is kind of weird, messed up thing to think about, but just curiosity, and just kind of seeing like who now is the actual, I guess, de facto leader. Was it like, for example, his second in command? I mean, because I would assume that everyone does have like a second in command to an extent, right? Or someone who at least leads, or maybe they have a collective of people who are actually. It's interesting. I don't think that's ever come up yet. All right, as far as having like, I guess like in today's world, like an APL or system patrol leader, although in this case it's a lot bigger than the actual squad. But just seeing like who's the one that takes over if the Primark does die, because a lot of them are dead, some of them are serving other gods, some of them are missing, and Gilliman's the only one I can think of that is actually still active, right? So I don't know, that was just something that I realized that just hasn't come up. But honestly, I thought essentially when I saw this that this guy is just your regular type person who's gonna turn bad guy, right? And he's just gonna be a bad guy to be a bad guy, right? Or maybe he had some reasoning because of the way he grew up Very shitty planet. Probably the worst one from what I was told from the comments. And that he probably just hated his luck of the draw. Maybe he could have done better being a Primark for like another Legion. And considering the skill gap and even strength and all that from a Primark to an actual Space Marine, what do you like? Did the Night Lords ever, or like the reason did the Night Lords never do anything to him? I mean, I don't know who was the one that called the assassination on him. Maybe it was himself. Maybe it was someone trying to. Maybe it was the captain in the beginning, right? That was trying to take the lead, because it seemed like he was taking the lead in the beginning, and maybe he was the one that ordered it, and because he knew maybe that Conrad didn't like them, that he would invite it, right? As far as just getting assassinated. But was it also possible that the Night Lords feared him, right? Because of that big gap in strength, like he could just demolish them, right? And then that's why they tried doing an assassination under the context of that, hey, he's probably just going to let it happen. He doesn't like us. He doesn't like the Emperor. Kind of wants to... I think they said that he had spite for him, right? Like for the Emperor, for giving him this role. But in any case, though, that's going to go ahead and do it for this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe. It really does help me a lot. Hit that dislike button if you didn't like it, and leave me little comments to maybe what it was, so I can improve this channel. I got a little tongue twisted there. If you're curious to see how I did in the Spartan race, check that out below too. I'm going to try to link it up here somewhere. But until then, I'll see you all in the next video.